I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life,
From historic tyrants to modern-day scandals, the British royal family has been plagued by its share of controversial and loathed members throughout history. But which of these regal figures earned the title of most hated? Join us as we uncover the notorious members of the British royal family who have earned the title of most hated. Number 15. James VI. Long ago, there was a young king named James. He was born in Scotland and became King James VI of Scotland when he was just a baby. His mother, Queen Mary of Scots, gave up the throne, and little James was left to rule. But since he was too young, other people helped run the country for him until he was older. Even though his mother was Catholic, James was raised as a Protestant. When James finally grew up and took control, something very special happened. In 1603, he became the King of England and Ireland too, after Queen Elizabeth I passed away. This important moment in history was called the Union of the Crowns. It was the first time one king ruled over Scotland, England, and Ireland together. Many people remember James for this great achievement, but behind this famous story, there's a darker and stranger part of James's life. You see, King James was terrified of witches. He truly believed in that witches were working with evil forces to harm him. These weren't just silly fears. James was convinced his life was in danger because of dark magic. His worries began after hearing about witch trials in Denmark. This caught his attention, and soon his fear of witches grew stronger. When James came back to Scotland, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He believed it was his duty to hunt down witches before they could harm him or others. One of the most well-known cases happened in a small town called North Berwick. Around 70 people were accused of witchcraft there. It was said that these people used magic to create a terrible storm at sea, hoping to sink the ship carrying James and his new wife, Anne of Denmark. The stories were wild and frightening. Some people even claimed that the witches tied the limbs of a dead man to a cat and threw it into the sea to summon the storm. Sadly, many of the accused were tortured until they confessed to things they never did. People were so afraid of what might happen that they believed anything James and his witch hunters said. The punishments were harsh, and many innocent people lost their lives because of these terrible accusations. James's fear of witches was so strong that he decided to write a book about it. He called it Demonology. In this book, he explained what he believed about witches and magic. James warned people about the dangers of dark magic and encouraged them to search for witches and punish them. His words made others even more frightened of witchcraft. Because of James's obsession, Scotland became one of the busiest places for witch hunting in all of Europe, even though it was a small country. It's believed that around 4,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Scotland, far more than in England. This terrible time in history was largely because of James's deep fear of dark magic. But James's life wasn't always filled with these dark thoughts. As he grew older, things started to change. After becoming King of England, his obsession with witches slowly faded. Though he still paid attention to witch trials now and then, he began to doubt some of the accusations. He started to question whether all the people being blamed were truly guilty. Even so, the damage had already been done. His reign left a heavy mark in history, with countless innocent people suffering because of baseless fears. What started as the story of a young king rising to power became a tale of fear and cruelty. Today, people remember King James for many reasons: the Union of the Crowns, his famous translation of the Bible, and sadly, his dark chapter of witch hunting. Though centuries have passed, the strange and troubling tale of King James VI and I still fascinates many. James, though good, ended many lives, but the next royal will shock you. Who was this? Let's find out. Number 14, King George IV. When George IV became king in 1820, people had mixed feelings about him. Some admired his charm and love for art, while others whispered about his personal troubles and the way he treated his family. His life was a strange mix of beauty, scandal, and heartache, and those mixed opinions followed him throughout his time as king. At first, George was known as the first gentleman of England. He loved fancy clothes, grand parties, beautiful paintings, and fine buildings. He had excellent taste and surrounded himself with luxury. But behind the glitter and glamour there were serious problems. George made poor choices, often spent too much money, and found himself tangled in many embarrassing situations. One of the biggest troubles in his life was his marriage. George married Caroline, but from the very beginning it was a disaster. The two of them argued constantly and soon drifted apart. Both George and Caroline found affection elsewhere. Caroline eventually left the country while George stayed home and continued his own affairs. Years later, when it was time for George's grand coronation, Caroline came back to England. She wanted to be named Queen Consort, standing beside George at the special ceremony. But George did everything he could to stop her. He even tried to pass a law called the Pains and Penalties Bill that would take away Caroline's royal title. The people of England didn't like this at all. They felt sorry for Caroline and thought George was being cruel and unfair. Parliament spent weeks arguing about the new law, and in the end it was thrown out. Still, George refused to let Caroline attend the coronation. On the very day of the event, something strange happened. Caroline became very ill. Not long after she passed away. The timing made people suspicious, and it made George even more unpopular. George's reign was also marked by money troubles. He loved to live in style and often spent far more than he could afford. His endless shopping and grand parties upset the public, especially as many families struggled with poverty at the time. His advisors found it difficult to control him. They thought George was selfish, hard to trust, and made decisions based on his own feelings instead of what was best for the country. While George was Prince Regent and later King, Lord Liverpool, his trusted advisor, helped lead the country. Lord Liverpool handled important matters like Britain's victory over Napoleon and peace talks with France. After Lord Liverpool retired, new problems appeared. One of the biggest issues was Catholic emancipation, giving more rights to Catholics in Britain. George was strongly against it. But as pressure from the public and politicians grew, he had no choice but to agree. It was a tough moment for a king who didn't like to be told what to do. George's personal life also brought him great sadness. His only legal child, Princess Charlotte, passed away young in 1817. Then his brother, Prince Frederick, passed away in 1827. When George IV himself passed away, the throne was passed to his other brother, William IV. Even though George IV left behind grand palaces and a beautiful art collection, people mostly remember him for his mistakes. His rule was filled with scandals, reckless spending, and poor decisions. Many consider him one of the most difficult kings in British history. Number 13. King Henry VII. Henry VII's story began during a very dangerous time in England. The country was caught in a terrible fight called the Wars of the Roses. Two powerful families, the Lancasters and the Yorks, were battling over who should be king. Young Henry was right in the middle of all this trouble. As a child, Henry was raised by his uncle, Jasper Tudor, a loyal supporter of the Lancasters, but he was also under the care of William Herbert, a Yorkist. This meant that even as a boy, Henry had to be very careful, as danger could come from anywhere. It was a tough and confusing time for him to grow up. When Henry was still young, King Edward IV from the Yorkist side took back the throne in 1471. Henry's life was in great danger. To stay safe, he escaped to Brittany, a place across the sea, where he lived in exile for 14 years. There, far from home, Henry waited patiently, hoping for the right moment to return and claim his destiny. That moment finally came in 1485. With help from France and Scotland, Henry gathered an army and set out to face King Richard III at the famous Battle of Bosworth Field. Even though Henry's army was smaller, he fought bravely and won. King Richard III was assassinated, and Henry became king, the last king in England's history to win his crown in battle. To make sure the fighting between the two families ended, Henry made a smart and kind choice. He married Elizabeth of York, the daughter of King Edward IV. This marriage brought the Lancasters and Yorks together, bringing peace to a country that had suffered for too long. It was a beautiful and hopeful moment for England. Henry was also very clever. Before the battle, he declared himself king, which meant anyone fighting against him could be seen as a traitor. This allowed him to take back lands and titles from his enemies legally, strengthening his rule. But peace didn't come easily. Henry faced small rebellions and plots, like one in 1486 involving the Stafford brothers and a man named Viscount Lovel. Luckily, Henry's careful planning and loyal followers stopped these threats before they could grow. Henry worked hard to keep his kingdom safe and peaceful. He made wise decisions and thought carefully before acting. Even though his path to the throne was filled with danger, Henry VII's reign marked a new beginning for England. By bringing the two families together and ending the long war, he earned a place as one of England's smartest and most thoughtful kings. The wrongdoings of his made him hated, but the worst is yet to come. The next on this list is who you'd never expect. Number 12, King John of England. Have you ever wondered why King John is remembered as one of the worst kings in British history? Stories, movies, and books often show him as cruel and greedy. Well, there's a reason for that, and it all comes from the way he lived his life. John was the youngest son of King Henry II. Because he was the youngest, he wasn't expected to get much land or power. People even called him John Lackland, which means John with no land. But his luck changed when his older brothers turned against their father. John stayed loyal, and because of this, his father made him Lord of Ireland in 1177 and gave him some lands. But John wasn't happy. He always wanted more power. When his brother, Richard the Lionheart, left England to fight in the Crusades, John saw his chance. While Richard was away, John secretly made plans to take the crown for himself. Things got even closer to going his way when Richard was captured and held for ransom. John even joined forces with France to try to grab the throne. But Richard's loyal friends stayed strong and stopped John's plans. Even though he failed then, John did become king in 1199 after Richard passed away. But his troubles were just beginning. John's nephew, Arthur of Brittany, the son of John's older brother Geoffrey, also wanted to be king. Back then, it wasn't clear who had the stronger right to the throne, the youngest son of the old king or the son of an older brother. A fierce fight broke out. John had the support of his powerful mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and many nobles from England and Normandy. Arthur, on the other hand, was backed by the French king, Philip II, and nobles from Brittany and other French regions. John eventually captured Arthur, and people whispered that he had him executed by drowning. No one could prove it, but many believed it. And it made people fear and hate John even more. After that, things got worse. John was a harsh ruler. He lost almost all his lands in northern France because his own followers turned against him. He taxed his people heavily and punished those who didn't pay. Nobles and regular people alike grew angry. Finally, in 1215, the nobles forced King John to sign a peace agreement called the Magna Carta. This was a big deal. It was meant to limit the king's power and protect the rights of the people. But true to his ways, John broke his promise not long after signing it, and the country fell into civil war. John's selfish and reckless choices caught up with him. In 1216, he passed away, leaving England in a mess. His rule was filled with mistakes, betrayals, and broken promises. That's why, even today, King John is remembered as one of the most disliked kings in British history. A man whose greed and poor decisions shaped the country in ways he never intended. Number 11. King Richard II. Have you ever heard of King Richard II? His life was like a storybook filled with promise, mistakes, and a very sad ending. Even famous writer William Shakespeare wrote about him. Richard became king in 1377 when he was just 10 years old. Imagine that. A little boy sitting on a big throne. Because he was so young, he had to rely on grown-ups to help him rule. Sadly, many of these advisors cared more about their own wealth than about the people of England. Not long after he became king, the country faced a big problem. A new tax called the poll tax was forced on people, and it was very unfair to poor folks. The people got so angry that they started a huge protest called the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. Thousands of peasants marched into London ready to fight for their rights. Even though Richard was young, he was brave. He met with the rebels and promised to listen to them. But sadly, after things calmed down, he broke those promises and punished many of them. It was the start of Richard's habit of making bad choices. As Richard got older, he became more stubborn. He only trusted a few close friends and ignored the advice of important nobles. This made many powerful people very unhappy. In 1387, a group of angry nobles called the Lords Appellant took control of the government, tired of Richard's poor decisions. For a short while, things seemed better. Richard took back control in 1389 and even made peace with his old enemies. But this peace didn't last long. In 1397, Richard turned against them. He punished and exiled those who once stood up to him. Historians call his last years as king a time of fear and cruelty. Then Richard made a huge mistake. In 1399, his uncle John of Gaunt passed away, but Richard refused to let John's son Henry Bolingbroke inherit his father's lands. This made Henry furious. While Richard was away in Ireland, Henry returned to England with a small army. People were so unhappy with Richard that many quickly joined Henry's side. Richard had almost no loyal supporters left. He was captured, taken to London, and locked up in the Tower of London. Not long after, Henry took the crown for himself, becoming King Henry IV. Richard was sent to prison, and not long after, he passed away. Some say he starved to death, but no one knows for sure. His death was as mysterious as his life. After he was gone, people told many stories about Richard. Shakespeare's famous play painted him as a weak and selfish king, blaming him for England's troubles. Even though modern historians think this might be a little unfair, most agree that Richard made many poor decisions. He pushed people away and ruled with harshness instead of kindness. The next in this list is someone already painted lovely, but behind the doors was something we never expected. But who is this? And how did he get into this list? Let's dive into it. At number 10, Edward VIII. Once upon a time in 1936, a man named Edward became the King of England after his father passed away. Most people expected him to be a strong and noble king, just like those who came before him. But Edward was different. He didn't care much about royal rules and old traditions. Instead, he followed his heart. And that's what changed everything. Edward fell deeply in love with a woman named Wallis Simpson. She was an American and had already been married twice. In those days, this was a big problem. Not only was Edward the king, but he was also the head of the Church of England, which did not allow such marriages. Everyone around Edward was shocked. Important leaders told him that if he married Wallis, he could no longer be king. It was a heartbreaking choice: keep his crown or be with the woman he loved. In the end, Edward chose love. In December 1936, Edward stepped down as king. His younger brother became King George VI. Edward was given a new title, the Duke of Windsor. And in 1937, he married Wallis Simpson in France. But the story didn't end there. Soon after getting married, Edward and Wallis visited Germany and even met with Adolf Hitler. This made many people uneasy. Some began to wonder if Edward supported the wrong side during a dangerous time in history. When World War II began, Edward worked with the British military in France. But after France fell, he was sent far away to the Bahamas as a governor, keeping him out of European affairs. Then, in 1945, secret papers called the Marburg Files were discovered. These documents hinted that Edward may have wanted Germany to win the war and hoped to return as king under their control. Though no one ever proved these claims, the rumors hurt Edward's reputation forever. For the rest of his life, Edward lived quietly in France with Wallis by his side. He stayed away from England and the royal family, having given up everything, his crown, his country, and his duty, for the woman he loved. There are unexpectedly some hated female royals, both in the times of old and in recent times. Stick with us to find out more. Number 9, Queen Mary I. In 1553, Mary I became the Queen of England, carrying a heart full of anger and sadness. She had seen how her father, Henry VIII, treated her mother, Catherine of Aragon, and it left deep scars. Now, as Queen, Mary was determined to take back what she believed was rightfully hers. Mary's reign began with strength and harsh decisions. Lady Jane Grey, a young girl who had briefly been called Queen, was quickly captured and executed. After this, Mary focused on bringing back the Catholic Church to England. She wanted to erase the changes her father and others had made. She ordered that old church lands be returned and forced the people to follow Catholic beliefs. But Mary's strict rules brought fear across the land. Many people refused to give up their Protestant faith. To deal with them, Mary allowed 283 people to be burned at the stake for going against her orders. This cruel punishment earned her the name Bloody Mary, and the people trembled in fear. In just a short time, people of all ages suffered under her rule. Mary's time as queen is still remembered in England's history as a dark and frightening chapter. Number 8. Queen Elizabeth I. In 1558, a young woman named Elizabeth became Queen of England. She was clever, strong, and determined to lead her country well. But being queen wasn't easy, and soon danger was waiting just around the corner. In 1569, something very dark happened. A group of powerful people who followed the Catholic faith secretly planned to remove Elizabeth from the throne. They wanted to free her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, who was locked away in prison, and make her the new queen. But Elizabeth was no fool. As soon as she learned about the plan, she acted quickly. She stopped the plot before it could succeed. To make sure no one else would dare betray her, over 750 people who took part in the plan were punished, and the main leader, a man named Babington, met a terrible end. This bold move showed everyone that Elizabeth was not a queen to be messed with. Even the Pope was furious and called her a heretic, saying she didn't deserve to be queen. But the dangers around Elizabeth didn't stop there. One of her closest friends was a man named Robert Dudley. People often whispered that the queen cared deeply for him, maybe even loved him. But Robert was married to a woman named Amy Dudley. In 1560, something strange and very sad happened. Amy was found dead at the bottom of the stairs in her home. It was ruled an accident, but rumors started flying. Some believed Robert had something to do with it. Others went as far as to suggest that Queen Elizabeth herself might have been involved because Amy stood in the way of the Queen's secret love. No one knows the truth to this day. The mystery of Amy's death has puzzled historians for centuries, and it's one of the many secrets from Elizabeth's long and remarkable reign. Queen Elizabeth I faced betrayal, heartbreak, and dangerous plots, but she stayed strong through it all. Let's come down to our time. There are still some women who are hated for their deeds. Who are these? What did they do? Let's dive in. Number 7. Princess Margaret. Princess Margaret, the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, lived a life filled with both beauty and heartbreak. In 1979, her family suffered a terrible loss when her cousin Lord Mountbatten and other relatives were assassinated by a bomb planted by the Provisional Irish Republican Army. This heartbreaking event deeply affected the royal family. While visiting the United States to support the Royal Opera House, Margaret kindly thanked the people of Ireland for their letters of sympathy after the tragedy. But soon, an untrue rumor spread that she had insulted the Irish community. Even though she quickly denied it, protests followed her, and her safety was at risk. To protect her, security around Margaret was made even tighter. Margaret's love life also made headlines. She fell in love with Peter Townsend, a married royal employee. After her father's death and her sister becoming queen, Townsend divorced his wife and asked Margaret to marry him. But government leaders and the church did not approve. They felt he wasn't the right match for a princess. In the end, Margaret made the painful choice to give up her love for Peter, placing her duty to family and country first. This brought her backlashes from the people. Number 6. Queen Consort Camilla. Camilla Parker Bowles has faced many challenges on her royal journey. Even after becoming Queen Consort following Queen Elizabeth II's passing, her past still shapes how people see her. Her story became complicated because of her long relationship with Prince Charles, which began before he and Princess Diana officially separated. When secret recordings of Charles and Camilla's conversations came out in the 1990s, many people were upset. They felt Camilla had hurt Diana, who was loved by so many. After Diana's sad death in 1997, Camilla and Charles started appearing in public together in 1999. At first, many were unhappy, but slowly people began to accept them. The Queen and Charles's sons gave their support, though the Queen Mother was less sure before she passed away in 2002. Charles and Camilla married in 2005 in a simple ceremony, marking a new beginning. Camilla was given the title Duchess of Cornwall instead of Princess of Wales, out of respect for Diana. When Charles becomes king, many think Camilla will be called Princess Consort, though some wonder if she might become queen. Over time, Camilla has worked hard to improve how people see her. By supporting many charities and doing her royal duties well, she has earned more respect and kindness. Number 5. Prince Michael of Kent. Prince Michael of Kent has often found himself at the center of royal gossip. As Queen Elizabeth II's first cousin, he drew attention not for royal duties, but for scandals that left